Well, I gotta tell you, my favorite genres of music are R&B, hip hop, and jazz, and those are the three types of music I grew up listening to the most. But since I've been following jazz music a lot too in my lifetime, there have been a lot of different jazz musicians that have played different jazz and musical instruments. Of course, you got the rhythm section of piano, bass, and drums. And of course, you got your horn sections as well. You know, you got your trumpets, your trombones, your reeds, which are saxophones and stuff like that. But there's a lot of saxophone players in the past more than 100 years of jazz history, which dates back to the late 19th, early 20th century. And yes, there's been a lot of different jazz multi instrumental instrument players, and there's even been like tuba players as well. Even some jazz players play French horn. And of course, a lot of jazz musicians play saxophones. You know, you got the soprano, the alto, the tenor, and the baritone. But there's also jazz players that have played clarinet and flute as well. And then there's those low clarinets, which are which weren't really that popular, especially back in the early days. But come the middle of the 20th century is when they started happening. You know, of course, most jazz musicians who play the low clarinets, you know, if it's the bass clarinet or the alto clarinet or the contra, they're often doublers that utilize the low clarinets as a secondary or a third horn. Um, well, here's my top 30. You know, you got John Purcell. Um, he played multiple reeds, you know, and he also played the bass clarinet. You got David Murray. He's a tenor sax player who also played the bass clarinet. Of course, he was one of the founding members of the World Saxophone Quartet. John Purcell, of course, played with Jack DeJohnette and Muhal Richard Abrams and was also part of the World Saxophone Quartet. And you, of course, you got the famous Anthony Braxton, who played pretty much every saxophone from the sopranino through the contrabass. But alto has been his main instrument, along with his contrabass clarinet as well. And then you had Joseph Jarman, who was a member of the Art Ensemble of Chicago. He played he played all the saxophones, all the woodwinds, and of course bass clarinet as well and flute. He played all the saxes from the sopranino through the bass, even though he mostly played alto and tenor. And then you had the innovator in Eric Dolphy, who played with Charles Mingus and Freddie Hubbard and Tony Williams and all those other great jazz musicians, even John Coltrane. He was like one of the founding members who would use the bass clarinet as a solo instrument, along with alto, sax, and flute. And then, of course, you have John Sermon from England, who mostly played on baritone sax and soprano sax, and also played bass clarinet. He's also worked with Jack DeJohnette. Yeah, David Murray's also worked with Jack DeJohnette as well, and also other great musicians. And then you got the great Joe Lovano, who's mostly a tenor player, but also plays alto clarinet, which is very not really popular in jazz like the B flat clarinet or the bass clarinet. And then you had the late Howard Johnson as well. He also played with Jack DeJohnette and Wilhelm Richard Abrams and Gil Evans. He played the contra bass clarinet in E flat, but he was best known for his tuba playing and his baritone sax playing. And then you got Paul McCandless as well, who played bass clarinet and oboe and soprano sax, a member of the group Oregon. And then you, of course, you got James Carter, who is a multi-woodwind player. He played bass clarinet and all the saxes and other horns, flute, clarinet, bassoon. He was also part of the World Saxophone Quartet as well. And then, of course, you got Dad, who plays bass clarinet and tenor sax. And Marty Ehrlich, who played bass clarinet, alto sax, and soprano sax. He also played with Mulhall Richard Abrams as well. And he's played with a lot of great groups. Also, the late John Carter. And then of course, you got Edward Kid Jordan, who played the B flat contrabass clarinet. He's played all the saxes as well, including alto and tenor. Um, we even had J.D. Perrin, who also played multiple reeds in contrabass clarinet. And then you also have the late Hamiet Blewett, who played E flat contrabass clarinet. He even played the alto clarinet. He was a founding member of the Black Artist Group and the founding member of the World Saxophone Quartet. And he also played with Charles Mingus and Gil Evans as well. And yeah, played contrabass clarinet, baritone sax, and flute. And then you had Joe Temperley. He played bass clarinet and bari sax. He was part of that Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra for many years. And no, you got the great Harry Carney from Duke Ellington. He started playing bass clarinet around toward the end of World War II, but he was mainly known for his baritone playing. He was great. And then, of course, Benny Maupin, best known for his work with Herbie Hancock. He played bass clarinet, also tenor sax and soprano sax. Oh, and then you got Bob Mintzer, who's also great. He was part of the Yellow Jackets and formed his own ensembles and his own big bands. Yep, bass clarinet and tenor sax. And then you got the great Gunther Hampel from Germany. He played bass clarinet as well, but he also played flute and vibes. And then you got Don Byron. He also was a great bass clarinet player, but also played mostly clarinet and tenor saxophone as well. And then you got Roger Rosenberg, who's another great bass clarinet player, who also played the baritone saxophone, part of Steely Dan's group. And then you have the late Romeo Pinke and George Marge, who were great studio musicians, who were great woodwind doublers. Yeah, they played on all great bands as well. And then, of course, Vinny Golia, who's an educator at Cal Arts, multi-reed player, part of Nine Winds. And he's played all the clarinets, all the saxes. And then the late William Breuker, who played bass clarinet and multiple saxophones, also from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And then Bruce Johnstone, who played bass clarinet and baritone sax. And Marcus Miller, who played bass clarinet and electric bass. And then all the way at the bottom, you got Donald Garrett, who worked with John Coltrane. He played bass clarinet a few times, but he was mostly a double bass player. Yeah, even Buddy DeFranco and Benny Goodman played bass clarinet. They were mostly clarinet players. Yeah. And Courtney Pine. And yeah, well, I hope you have a great day. I'll see you soon.